Rule number 1, never skip over texture. So when every surface in a room is flat, smooth, or shiny, you don't get comfort, you just get cold, right? It's the difference between a space that looks sterile versus a space that actually feels lived in. And so here in this room, you can see that everything in the room is speaking the same language, right? We got this smooth black leather, the shiny glass, the flat TV screen, and even the metal legs on the furniture. Right? There's no conversation and there's no contrast. And even though there's a rug, it doesn't save the space because it's visually low impact. It doesn't bring any new texture. There's just more pattern layered over the same hard finishes. Now, the pillows do try to soften the look, but there's too few of them, they're too small, and they're just not varied enough in shape or material to change the feel of the room. And so overall, the space feels more like a waiting area than it does a cozy living room because it's sterile, stiff, and just overall uninviting. But contrast that with this living room, which mixes textures with so much more intention, right? You've got this plush boucle sofa, warm wooden slats, cream curtains, and this beautiful matte lamp that are all playing off of each other. And so the seating here isn't just comfortable, but it looks comfortable because it's layered in fabric with visible softness and depth. And you can spot texture here even in the supporting elements, right? We've got this ridged marble coffee table, the woven chair, and the soft wool rug underfoot. And so every material is adding a new sensory experience. And so the result is a space that feels warm, quiet, and grounded, even though it uses a neutral color palette, because it's not about color, it's about the contrast in feel. Now, rule number 2 is to never let storage look like clutter, right? Storage is supposed to solve problems, not become a problem of its own. But when your drawers, shelves, and cabinets look like chaos behind those closed doors, your home starts feeling disorganized even when it's technically clean. And just because it's hidden doesn't mean that the clutter doesn't matter. So let's think about how this actually happens in practice, right? A lot of the time, you'll find that you get clutter when you organize items by size or habit, but not by function. Okay, so then you've got cups mixed in with candles, spices stacked sideways, and utensils that just look like a junk drawer exploded. And all this clutter really slows you down because you're always shuffling through duplicates or forgotten gadgets just to find your everyday tools. Now, when you look at a drawer or a cabinet like this from the outside, it may seem like normal storage, but on the inside, it's loud, messy, and completely stressful. So this isn't storage, it's just mental overflow. And items like glassware and ceramics, which could be beautifully displayed, really lose their charm when they're just buried in visual noise. And so the value of them just gets lost in that mess. But when you get this right, all of a sudden everything has a home and it totally makes sense. Your items are grouped by use, not just crammed together randomly, and you instantly know where to reach for snacks, for seasonings, or for a particular type of dinnerware. And it's the containers that do the work. So baskets, dividers, or even just matching jars create structure for you. And so instead of stacking things on top of each other, the space itself actually starts to work for you. Plus you win back your breathing room, right? I'm not talking about minimalism here, I'm talking about control. Because a half-empty shelf looks a whole lot more elegant than a fully packed one if it's styled with space in mind. And even behind closed doors, things still feel elevated, right? You don't need labels or Pinterest jars to feel organized because you just have structure, rhythm, and restraint. Now, interior design rule number 3 that you should never break is never make lighting an afterthought. I mean, lighting isn't just functional, it's foundational. And the right lighting plan can make a space feel warm, balanced, and really expansive. But the wrong one will make it feel dim, heavy, and awkward, even if the rest of the room is beautiful. So when lighting is done wrong, it just feels random, right? There's no clear plan, just pendant lights over the bar, a few recessed bulbs scattered around, and some accent lights that don't do much for the actual space. And so the room ends up feeling cramped and low, right? Even with large open layouts, these rooms just look dim and shadowy, and the lighting pulls everything down, plus the color temperatures become really inconsistent, right? You've got harsh yellows clashing with the cooler toned fixtures, which just makes the space feel really cluttered, even if it's clean, because it's just visual chaos. And the overall function of the space is compromised as well, because there's not enough task lighting where it matters, and so you end up cooking or preparing meals in a shadow, no matter how nice your kitchen is. But when you do this right, the lighting is layered with intention. So there's a mix of ambient lights, task lights, and accent lights, which are all working together instead of competing with each other. And the brightness gets balanced across the room, so there are no dead zones or overly lit corners, just a clean, even glow that highlights the layout. And the color temperature also gets unified, so soft whites or neutral tones keep everything cohesive and calming, which makes both the materials and the decor look a lot better. And overall, lighting just adds to the design of the space, right? It frames focal points, it outlines textures, and it just subtly guides your eye around the room. Now, rule number 4 is to never decorate just to fill space. All right, I know that for some people, empty walls and corners can feel kind of uncomfortable. But rushing to fill them up just makes your space feel busier as opposed to better. But real design isn't about covering every inch. It's about choosing what to place where and why. And so these examples will show the difference between styling with intention versus just decorating for the sake of it. So here, the bathroom wall is totally packed with art, right? Every gap has been filled, but there's no hierarchy or flow. And each of these pieces is competing for attention, which just makes the space feel chaotic instead of visually expressive. And the same is true for this bedroom, right? The wall is covered, but nothing is anchoring this arrangement. It just kind of feels like random bits were added just to use up that wall space, but there's no negative space to let anything breathe. And so the visual clutter actually shrinks the room, even if the intent was to make it more interesting. And so overall, these spaces are just trying too hard, and the result is noise, not personality. But by contrast, in this bathroom, the black and white frames are perfectly scaled to the space, right? There's still decor, but it's been edited down so that each piece has impact. And the negative space around the art is doing just as much work as the art itself because it gives the room a clean, composed feeling. And this bedroom does a much better job of nailing balance and intention, right? Each of these frames lines up with the bed, the sconces, and even the windows, and it all feels really considered. Nothing feels thrown in after the fact. And so this is how you decorate when you're designing a space, not just trying to fill it up. And so these examples still use frames, but this time they're edited and intentionally placed. And so this proves that you don't need to avoid decor, you just need to stop adding things just to fill up your space. And on a bit of a similar note, rule number 5 is never hang art too high or too small. I mean, art isn't just filler for your wall, right? It's part of how a space feels anchored. And when it's too small or placed too high on the wall, it just loses impact and throws off the balance of the whole room. And so the goal is to make the art feel connected to the furniture, not like it's floating away from it. So here's what you should not do, okay? Here, the art is hung way too high above the furniture, which leaves this big empty gap that makes everything feel visually disconnected. I mean, some of these frames are so small that they just get lost on the wall, which makes the room feel more empty as opposed to more finished. And even gallery walls feel pretty random when the pieces don't align with furniture or follow a clear visual rhythm. These couple of examples all have art, but because of poor scale and poor placement, they just weaken the design of the room instead of lifting it up. But contrast that to these rooms, right? Here, the art sits just a few inches above the furniture, close enough to feel connected to it, and still part of the overall layout of the room. And everything just aligns when art is centered over the bed, the sofa, or a console, and the spacing is even and intentional. For example, here we've got this statement piece which is centered above the sofa, hung just a few inches from the top of the backrest for that ideal eye level effect. And I think you can see pretty clearly that when art is scaled right and placed at the correct height, it doesn't just decorate the room, but it anchors, enhances, and completes the room. So at the end of the day, great design isn't about following every trend. It's about mastering the fundamentals that always work. Texture, storage, lighting, proportion, placement. When you get these things right, your home instantly feels more balanced, more welcoming, and more put together. Break these rules and no amount of expensive furniture or decor can save your space, but follow them and even the simplest room will feel beautifully designed. So if you enjoyed this video, I've put links to a few others in the description below that I think you'll like as well, or you can check out this one, which YouTube believes is the #1 video that you should watch. I'll see you there.